when you asked me to come on, I was so embarrassed because the first thing that came to my mind, which I suppose is coming back to what people would say behind your back, is that Hugh had come to both of you and said, "Oh, I feel really bad for Laura. It's getting awkward. We have to have her on the podcast." Mm-hmm. My coping mechanism was just accepting that I'm number two. Or if I did get invited to something, it was because I was friends with Steph, not because of me.
The Imperfects invites you into a very safe place. A place where we share without judgment and drink heaps of vulnerability. Grab yourself a cup. This is the Vulnerabilitea House.
Hello guys, how are you?
Very well, how are you?
Good, very happy to be in the tea house.
Great.
Yep.
Yeah.
And very excited to have a special guest in the tea house today.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't want to take away your bio duties, Hugh, but Laura Henshaw is here.
Thank you. Hi.
Hi, Laura. How are you?
I'm actually very nervous.
Are you really?
I am.
Well,
No.
can I just...
Yes. No,
No.
I guess.
You have your own podcast. This
Yes.
is not strange to you to be on a podcast.
No,
You're very used to
it's your
that.
podcast.
It's our podcast.
Yeah.
It is ours. But I like on your phone, it says that I'm just on the desk right now. You are exactly where you need to be. That is a great
Yeah, that's
reminder.
great.
I've got that above my bed
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
That exact phrase.
because it's very for bedtime. It's like, yeah, oh God, I need to be here.
All right. It's not a
Very
presence.
literal.
It's just
Yeah.
because you've got a bad memory. It's like, you're like, oh, yeah, this is where I need to be for sleeping.
Yeah.
But Laura, yeah, so why do you have, just quickly before we get into it, why do you have that on your phone?
Yeah, it's just a really nice quote. And I think this morning too, because I'm such a fan. I told myself I wasn't going to do this, but I'm such a fan of all of you and the work that you do. It's incredible. And maybe later we can get into the story of when you asked me to come on the podcast, what went through my head.
Yep.
But this morning actually last week I listened to the episode you did with Ben Crow, and something that Josh said has been my mantra this morning, and that it's that even at my worst, I'm good enough. I don't know. I'm going to cry.
Wow. That's an early cry.
Yeah.
It's good. Stop the stopwatch. No, but it's such. But it is a really.
It's embarrassing. It's
Not
been
at
30
all.
seconds.
No, but it's
Not at all.
If it means.
So thank you.
Oh,
It is a
worries.
really powerful thing, because I agree, like what Ben Crow said on that episode. Let it out, Laura.
Yeah.
Just let it out.
This is definitely the earliest cry we've had.
Yeah.
And
I'm so embarrassed.
You
No,
shouldn't
no,
have.
don't be silly.
Not at all.
but it's a beautiful sentiment. I think we kind of rushed over just because Ben Crow's episode is full, it's just full of
Good
every
stuff.
every line's could be on a poster or on a t-shirt. So you don't get desensitized to it. But Josh's thing of at my worst, I'm good enough. It's really beautiful. So
Yeah.
that's really lovely that it's sort of helped you this morning.
I'm
Sort
very
of.
resonated with you. Yeah.
But you no need to be nervous, Laura, at all. We're
No, but
so
I was when I said, "Why are you nervous for?" You are in the Vulnerabilitea House, and I think that is a nerve-wracking thing to do. But I picture you not being a nervous person because of all the stuff that you do. It would now be a good time to read the bio.
Oh, definitely.
Okay.
And I can stop crying.
Laura Henshaw is an author, model, law graduate, personal trainer, podcaster, and she's the CEO, co-founder of global health and lifestyle brand Kick that she runs with her best friend, Steph Claire-Smith, a former guest on the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
So, Laura, welcome.
Thank you.
That's
Yeah.
an
Thank you.
impressive list of
Yeah.
things, isn't it? God.
And impressively read, Hugh. That's probably
Yeah.
the cleanest
Yeah.
reading I've ever heard you do.
It is an impressive read, but I think the things in the paragraph are
Are
more
slightly more
impressive.
No, I think it was the read.
Yeah,
I think
no.
it was the read.
Sorry, that is rude to brush over how impressive the things are.
What?
It was the read.
This is not the question from the Vulnerabilitea House, but what out of all those things, if I left out, would you be most oh, you didn't say that?
Great question.
Is there anything there you're no, say that bit, tell them that bit?
To be honest, when people do my intro, I tune out.
You didn't
and
listen.
I wasn't listening.
Okay, so out of
Laura, do you know where you are?
No, but I suppose it's interesting because there's lots of things in there, and I'm all of the different things. I think I suppose Kick's my life.
Okay.
Yeah, so that would be something. If you missed out Kick, I'd be like, well, I'm all those other things, but Kick is
Yeah.
So do you mind me saying, so you're 29? Is that okay to say that?
30.
You're 30?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, that's fine to say.
So author, model, law graduate, personal trainer, podcaster, and the CEO. You've done a lot.
Jeez, yeah.
Oh, thank you. It's interesting though. I don't think that I have.
But that's common, I think. But that is interesting that you think that. What's more interesting, what we think or what you think?
Definitely you.
Okay.
Oh, that's interesting.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, so Laura, as you know, you've heard the show before. This is the Vulnerabilitea House. And in the Vulnerabilitea House, we pick from a deck of bluey cards. And on each card is a question that will hopefully sort of bring upon some form of story or memory or some sort of vulnerable thing that you might be willing to share. The deck is in front of you. So if you just want to pick the top 3 cards and read them out, and if any of them strike a chord or feel like they resonate in some way, then please talk about it. If not, you can just keep picking cards until something works.
It's funny. Before I read them, I have to say and Hugh, I told you this, that when Ryan, you came on our podcast.
Loved it.
Thank you. We did this with you as we did with you, and Josh, we would also love to have you on
Wow.
if you're ever free.
Oh, I'm always free.
Oh, wonderful.
No, I'd love to. That'd
That's
be
a lie.
wonderful.
He's not always free. He's actually really busy at the
You are,
moment.
you at the live shows. But we did, as a joke, we did it to Hugh as well, where we made these fake bluey cards, and I can't remember what we called it, like Vulnerabilitea House or some
Hilarity cards.
hilarity cards,
Hilarity.
exactly.
Yeah.
And we did fake bluey cards. We put them on, and Ryan, I was mortified when you said to me when you first saw them, you thought that we had just taken your concept and changed the start and just copied it.
Well, I misunderstood.
And so I was sitting there thinking, and you were so cool about it. No, he was like, well, that's fine if you want to, do what we do. That's cool. That's a compliment. And I was mortified.
I was halfway through drafting an email to one of my business associates to start a business called Keep It Even Cleaner. But I've cancelled that since understanding. It's like a Larry David spite store.
Anyway, so I promise in reading these, I'm not going to learn any more information and then take it to my podcast and steal it.
Good.
Well, Ryan's gathering data for Keep It Even Cleaner, so that's fine. You're over.
Okay.
Here we go.
Okay.
Yeah.
3 cards being selected.
Okay. What is a time you felt truly alone? Oh,
Jeez.
that's a
Bang.
heavy one.
Yeah, welcome.
Okay. How do you think people might talk about you behind your back? Geez, you've got some
Doozies.
That's the
good ones.
Yeah.
What is something that seems unachievable to you?
I'd say from
Well,
the
these
bio,
are-
probably nothing, but
Okay, so I told myself if I were ever to have the privilege of coming on this podcast and I would be able to do this, I would choose the one that scares me the most.
Oh, my God.
Wow, that's brave.
And so why don't we do, how do you think people might talk about you behind your back?
I'm so glad.
How,
I mean, I'm very. It's admirable that you would choose that one.
how intrepid of you.
Yeah,
I don't even know what that word means.
yeah. I'm
What
pretending
does
to
it
know.
mean?
Yeah.
Like adventurous and
Adventurous,
courageous
yeah.
and yeah.
Yeah.
It
Wow.
is.
Okay. I mean, that's the one that whenever it comes up, whenever a guest comes on, the three of us just,
know.
in fact, we did have a
Ooh.
conversation once about should we do a whole episode on that?
Yeah.
Where the three of us doing it? Nah, that's too hard. We're not doing that. This is,
Yeah.
thank you for doing that. That's incredible.
Yeah.
Oh, that's okay.
So okay. So how do you think people would talk about you behind your back? It is such a terrifying. Even just to sit with the question for too long terrifies me. Just thinking about it for me.
Yeah, it's making me feel really sick. Actually.
I know. But good luck. Don't mean to freak
Thank
you
you,
out.
Ryan.
Well, I don't know. What does it bring up for you?
Because
What
I'm
do you-
interested. Like, is it? Have you thought about people in your head? Like, are they people that you're close to? Are they your friends, your family? Because I since that question's come up, I've been thinking, what do people say behind my back, and trying to work out what it is. And it's quite an uncomfortable thing to sit with. So take it away.
I think when I hear this question, I mean, you could think about it as positive things, but that's probably not, I suppose, where many of us would go as the first thought. I think when I really ask myself what this is, and I think it's interesting, especially in what we do, in that what people say behind our back is often on the internet for us to read.
Right.
And I do read a lot of it.
Really?
Yes.
Why?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that Steph, my business partner and best friend, asks me all the time why I read it. I think I have...
We're talking about like really negative, like troll type comments.
Of course.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
I think it was maybe through high school. It's something that I've never been the smartest or the best at anything. I was always kind of in the B team with sport, but I just loved it, so I participated. With school, I was never, those kids that can just get through and they get everything right and they don't have to study. I was never one of those. But I do know that and I learned through school that if I tried worked my ass off and I studied every single hour, like in year 12, I'd lock myself or went to the library for 12 hours a day. I could then, if I worked really hard, then I could achieve the things that I wanted to achieve. And so with that knowledge, I think I've then applied that to my life, which I am very grateful for, because I absolutely would not be where I am today without putting that extreme pressure on myself. However, I think at the same time as well, because I put so much pressure on myself to be everything to everyone and be the best at what I do, and with the work that we do at Kick, help as many people as we can, I then find sometimes that self-sabotage is, and going and reading those troll comments and taking it on board. Like I've had times when I've gone and read these horrible internet blogs where everything's anonymous and read things about myself and taken on the feedback. But I think that I do go to it because I feel like it's this thing that I can't keep coming back to of, if I can always be better and better and better, but obviously it's not helpful to take on the stuff.
Well, I mean, like when I think, not to make it about my experience at all, but when, I've been relatively lucky that I haven't had that much trolling in the past, but I've had bits and pieces over the years. But I think the more I get older, I'm now in my late 60s, so I'm less affected by what people say online because it's not actually behind my back. It's just they're just trying to get attention of some sort, which for whatever reason, it could be for a number of reasons. But it's the things that, because I think it's when I find myself talking about someone else behind their back, I then sometimes think, hang on, if I'm talking about other people, other people
scary,
are talking
right?
about me.
Yeah.
Do you ever think about it like from that point of view, like away from the online, but like more, and not even, and even, and this may be not what you're thinking at all, and it may not be an issue at all for you, but I don't even really think about it in terms of my work. I think about it in terms of my friends,
Like your personality.
my personality. Like what are people? When people jump in their cars at the end of like hanging out, going at a barbecue, what are people saying about me?
That's confronting.
That's what it brings up for me, and I just wanted to only bring that up just to see if you ever think about it from that point of view.
I think it's interesting. For me, I find separating the online stuff, obviously they're strangers and they're anonymous, but I feel like sometimes when you read stuff online that are the things that are your biggest insecurities,
Right.
and you've seen someone type it out,
Yeah.
then you believe it. And then sometimes, and then when you have people in your real life, because obviously the internet is not the real world, you then imagine them saying that. Even when we have people on the podcast sometimes, after they leave, I'll think, I talked about myself too much. I didn't listen enough. They're going to think I didn't ask good enough questions, that I'm not smart enough, that I shouldn't be doing this podcast, and they're going to think they've wasted their time. And that happens a lot. I think that's something, I suppose that's social anxiety, because it's questioning, it's even when I have a birthday or something, I'll run around to everyone, and I'm getting better at it now. But there was a time where I'd run around to everyone and be like, you don't have to stay. Please know you can leave at any time. Or it's like when you ask someone if they're available, like to catch up or whatever, it's like checking first, making sure, if you have anything else on, like please, like make sure you do that. Don't think you have to hang out with me, because it's like that fear of you'd never want anyone else to be. And I think that maybe comes from, because I'm a people pleaser and I really struggle to say no, I often find myself in situations sometimes where I don't want to be somewhere just because I'm, when you burn out and you're really exhausted and you're like, why did I should have said no. And so I think because I have those thoughts, I then think that in every other situation I'm in, that people would be having the same thoughts about me, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like self-doubt around social situations, is that like a thing that you experience?
Yeah. It's just kind of questioning everything that you have said. And then it's funny, there's all these funny memes online about it, but it's genuinely me sometimes, and Steph will always laugh about it. But I'll have said something to someone 3 years ago and I'm still thinking about if that was the reason we never spoke again, or if they thought, made something up about me in their head, or took that and now have told other people what I said. And often when I've spoken to people about it, they then say, I honestly don't remember what you're talking about. However, it's consumed me, or taken up mental load for a very, very long time.
To the extent where you'll avoid talking to that person again because you're worried that you've offended them or something?
Oh, probably over. I'll probably go above and beyond to be like super as nice to them as possible and put myself second all the time because I'm so worried that I've offended them that time 3 years ago. So then it's like I just have to exaggerate everything that I do instead of just talking to them about it, which I found every time it's like, it's fine.
Sorry if this sounds like a really strange question considering what you've just been talking about, and you don't have to go here, but
what's your favourite cereal? That is a sidestep.
Yeah. When you were
what is
sort of setting up.
I'm interested now.
Seriously, every day I have Milo cereal at 3 o'clock at the office.
Whoa, wow.
Milo cereal.
I did not expect that.
With no milk.
Hang on, is Milo cereal
not
just
for breakfast?
Milo in a bowl?
No, it's in these little cute shell shapes.
Oh, sure.
It makes a big crunch when you eat it,
especially if you don't have milk. Yeah.
That sounds great. Sorry, Josh, I'm completely derailed.
I'm glad we went there.
Yeah, really important. There's the promo.
This is vulnerable. When you were talking about you sort of used it to set up the story, but you said, I'm not one of those people who's very good at things, or like I'm always a B team, to summarise. But I learned that if I worked hard enough, I could be what I wanted to be. Where did that come from? Where did the sort of that voice saying that I'm not an A team person, do you know when that, do you remember when that started happening or where that began?
I think possibly it was, and a moment I think back to was when I was in year 9, and my education for my mum especially was extremely important, that we got the best education possible and that we were able to, my parents separated when I was in grade 6 or grade 7, and my mum wasn't working full time at that point and then had to go and work full time, and which was fine, but she'd been out of the workforce for a little bit. And my mum, I think, was so scared that something like that would happen to us and that we wouldn't have, because often in heterosexual relationships, mums stay home, and then what happens with that is then you're out of the workforce, and then to go back into work, then you don't have the same earning capacity, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. So my mum we had a sticker on our fridge that said, a man is on a financial plan growing up. My dad's in my life too, but mum was very, very, and I knew for her, me achieving in school was so important to her, and she also worked so hard to send us to the school. We went to a Catholic school, and my mum worked her absolute ass off to send us to that school and sacrificed a lot for us. And so I remember in year 9, I tried out for, what did I do? I did McRob.
Select entry.
Select entry. So it's like Melbourne High. Did you go to Melbourne High?
No.
Oh, okay. I don't know why I thought you did.
I am wearing a I went to Melbourne High t-shirt. So
thought you did.
Why
I think
that.
you're thinking of Richard Van Kylenberg, our dad.
Yeah,
That's
our
who you're
dad
thinking
Did he
of.
go to Melbourne?
He did.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know your
Mum
dad.
went to McGraw.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go.
Yeah. No, people often get me and their dad mixed up all the time.
Yeah, not our dad. This is
He's our friend.
Yeah. I'm a friend, not a dad.
He is 60, but that's maybe the confusing part. I don't know.
Yeah. Sorry, Laura. This is
Derail
being
sides.
derailed.
No, but I did. So I did the McRob, which where your mum went. I wasn't actually. I don't know your dad, but I hope maybe to meet him one day. Not that I know
He's
him.
lovely. Yeah, he's great.
You would love him.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I did the McRob test. I did the MLC test, and I can't remember the other school. I did another test to get a scholarship to go because I just knew that if I could get into a school like that, it would help me get it. Hopefully, which is I now know is not true, but get a better ATAR, get a better education. I had a fantastic education.
Sorry to jump in. Did you at that stage have the awareness that if you got a scholarship, it would ease the financial strain on your mum?
Yes, absolutely, because then mum wouldn't have to pay my current school fees and dad. And so I did those tests and I almost got into all of them, but I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And I think ever from that point, I knew that I wasn't quite there. So I think absolutely from that point, it's been that I know that I'm not at the level I expect of myself or that other people are at. And so for me to get there, I have to push myself to extreme levels and do a lot of work. But I can't let that level go.
What do you mind if we come back to, you said before that the comments that you've read aligned with your fears of what people maybe said about you. Do you remember what the comments are or do you?
Yeah, I could probably find one.
Oh, is it on your phone?
Yeah.
The phone that ironically says you're exactly where you need to be.
Yeah.
But you suck.
That's on the back. That's on the back. The front is the dangerous part.
Yeah.
And I don't want
Do
it
you
to
mind
be,
me asking why you saved them?
I think it's two things. One is that there's probably when I saved them, it was like, this is constructive feedback that I can take on to be better at what I do, which is, for everyone listening, the dumbest. I would never advise that. It's so dumb. Like, honestly.
Yeah.
And then the other part is because I'm going to read it, but I feel like as I'm about to read this now, I'm thinking, I think there's also this comfort of it being in the corner of the internet where only trolls go, to now reading it out in front of a lot of a very, very big audience. So I suppose that right now, if I'm being honest with myself, I have a fear that people will listen and be like, oh, yeah, whatever anonymous 899 is right.
Will agree with that,
Yeah.
right?
But then there's
You don't
also
have to read it out. You don't have to read it out.
No, it's okay, because I think there's also the other side of it that is I'm taking back the power in reading it out.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I found two. Laura Henshaw, queen of virtue signalling. Anyone who consistently tries to portray themselves as some innocent person that cries and feels sad for people all the time is generally going to be the opposite in real life. Lol, Laura Henshaw is a basket case with absolutely no emotional resilience and so much privilege. Can tell she's never been through a difficult life experience before. She's so out of touch. Laura just has very little personality. Laura is boring as batshit, hence the weird attention seeking and lack of awareness of her privilege. She's so thin and doesn't look fit and healthy at all. She looks like a bobblehead. There you go.
Jeez.
I mean, that is.
I don't know what to say to those.
It's kind of. I mean, I think. Do you when you read them, like you've had some distance from it, you've had some time to read them now. And
I don't know why I'm crying because I don't.
no,
they're
but
so
is.
mean.
It's really
you're crying 'cause
mean.
It's mean.
It's
Like, they're
really
being
mean
to you. It's
and
like
a horrible thing to write to anyone. But what do you think about? Do you think at all about the people who've written them?
Yeah, I mean, that's practical. And I mean, I talk about it all the time in all the work that I do. But when you actually think about it, I think I have this fear, and this is something that especially with my little sisters, we talk about this all the time. I have to show up to the world at 110% or whatever it might be, every single, like with being the most positive person, extremely kind, all those things that I truly am, because I'm so worried that people will think that I'm inauthentic and write things with the work that we do at Kick. A lot of people find we get incredible stories that, Kick's changed their life and their relationship with themselves and with exercise and with their body, and that's amazing. And so I think because I put so much pressure on myself to uphold that, which is so important, it's like, well, maybe it's just everyone on the internet that's never met me thinks this, but the people that know me don't.
The things that you talk about in your podcast and through Kick clearly has a very specific set of values that are obviously really important to you as well. It's sort of like a weird blurred line, I find, that when we do things professionally where we're ourselves, even here, us doing the Imperfects, there's this weird blurred line between the person that we are and the person that we are at the Imperfects. And so people, although we speak a certain way on our podcast, I wouldn't necessarily speak the way I speak on the podcast at a dinner party, because it would just be weird. People would be like, "Why'd you bring a deck of cards
and a microphone?"
But it's more like the persona, which we all have personas, and I think a lot about this at the moment, which is that I don't even think I know who I really am, who is the real, authentic version of me without the curation that goes into the people that I'm with. So if I'm with if I come on your podcast, unconsciously, I'm being a certain person because I want to fit in and I want to belong on that podcast. Same when I'm with you guys on the Imperfects, I want to bring a certain amount of vulnerability that I probably wouldn't bring when I'm hanging out with other friends who wouldn't value it or care about it as much. So I just wonder with you, Laura, the people who are commenting, I just wonder whether it's hard or easy to separate the comments that are coming at you or coming at your Kick version of yourself, and then how much separation even is there between the two? Is that a really rambly question? Does that make sense?
I think if anyone comments on my body, I don't really do modelling anymore at all. If I did a shoot and someone said I look shit, honestly, I probably do, because I don't really know how to move my body. So that couldn't care less. Nothing to do with my self-worth for me right now, and I've worked really hard to get here, is connected with the way that my body is. However, if it's anything to do with the work that we do with Kick, and I think this is what happens when you found a company that is so intertwined with your personal values and what you believe in and what I care so much about, when people question that, that's when it's really hard to make that separation. But I think too, in terms of, I'm really conscious right now that people would be listening and being like, why would you get this person on your podcast who's just crying and having a pity party or whatever? And I don't want it to come across like that at all, because I think for me, it's knowing that I get those comments that people will say, we're not doing a good enough job, or we're not good enough, or in anything. I think what, for me, in living my authentic self, and I don't know who I am. I think we're always going to be working out. If I think I stripped everything back, especially took Kick out of me, I don't know who I am without Kick. I truly don't. It's very scary to think about. Even though I know that I'm not good enough, I'm not as good as the best person that's ever done a podcast, or, I might do a TV interview and I might think, I think of Jamila Rizvi, and I'll be like, oh God, I should think of how she does interviews and I suck and I shouldn't be doing this. But it's getting up the next time and doing it again, even though I know that I haven't solved the criticism or the issues that people have with me, and I'm not perfect, but I'm not living my life for them, for the trolls, right? I hope no one lives their life for trolls. That would be a horrible life to live.
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting. I've been trying to formulate a question in my head and I can't quite get it right.
You have the best question, so I'm really excited.
No, well, I didn't get your hopes up for this one. I think there's something really interesting in a couple of things that you said. One was there's a comment that you said before about the internet not being real life, and there's real life outside that. And then you layering that with how you don't want this to be like a pity party was the phrase you used. And then there was this inner dialogue for you of these things that you need to work harder, you need to be better, to be, well, applying it to myself because I have to be worthy of something. it seems interesting to me that you selected those comments, and although they're nasty and they're overblown and they're ridiculous, it feels like we live in a world now where you've got this real thing, the internet, where you can go and for you there's a lot more of it because you're a public figure. But for an 18 or 19-year-old, if they want to go and find out something nasty written about themselves that confirms the worst things that they think about themselves, they don't have to look that hard. They could probably find someone at their school doing it. I don't know, maybe this is just a statement to say I don't think it's a pity party, because I think it's really a common experience for so many people that we are able to look online and find our innermost fears about ourselves and insecurities confirmed pretty easily. And yes, there's more for you, but it exists for other people as well. I guess if I had to try and work that into a question, how do you make the internet not real? Because for so many people it is real life because they're stuck in it.
Oh, it's so hard. And I think for kids now growing up with phones and socials, I mean, even when we were, actually, I don't know.
Don't look at me when you say we.
You were.
I would send faxes to other classes and stuff.
I grew up with MySpace.
Yeah, I had MySpace top friends.
I
Yeah.
had MySpace.
Yeah.
And I mean, even thinking about that as a concept, right? We used to rank our friends and we used to see it. And so I think even though we're on our phones 1,000 times more than we were, there's always been that there is somewhere you can go on the internet to find out what people say about you. And it's interesting in me saying this because I know I sound extremely hypocritical because I'm definitely still working through it. But to be able to show up in my job and in my life and not let these comments, like while I do have to work through them and I'm not at a point on my journey, I don't know if I'll ever get here where I can read something like that and be like, oh, whatever, I don't care. I don't know them. But I think it's being able to, for me, really challenge the people-pleasing element of myself and also valuing my self-worth on something that is completely out of my control, which is what people think of me. And that is such a hard thing to do, but we can't control it. I can't control what people are going to, people will listen to this podcast or things that I do and they're not going to like me. Like there's definitely going to be people that are going to not like me. I'm sure there'll be people that maybe like what I say too, but it's always, obviously it's the troll comments that are always the loudest and you forget everything else. But it's about, for me, really continually telling myself every single day that I'm not on this planet to be liked by everyone. And I can't live my mission and our mission with Kick, which is so intertwined in myself right now, by pleasing every single person, because I will fail every single day of my life if I live my life trying to please others.
Yeah, I would almost go as far as to say that you're not on this planet to be liked by anyone. Like, I don't even think you need to be liked, like not you personally, but I think people generally. I just don't think. I think it's
a bonus.
If people do, great, but that's not the goal.
Yeah, I think that's tricky when I'm just thinking about myself now, as I often do. Sorry, everyone, but I think that's tricky when you're growing up, thinking that you don't like yourself, so you need other people to like you to give you. It feels like you need other people to like you to believe that you're okay, because deep down you don't think you're good enough or you don't actually like yourself.
But is it? And I don't completely.
That's just coming from my personal. Yeah, and I'm agreeing with you 100%. But I'm just sort of saying how that can be a really hard thing to get to.
No, I know, but I totally hear that. But I guess I'm thinking.
Are you guys fighting?
No, sorry, I didn't mean to.
It is on.
Absolutely not a fight.
It's very calm.
No, it's not. It's more. I'm more just thinking like, idealistically, I'm thinking. I guess is it like. Because of course that I totally
Someone's
get that.
Someone's been to see Eckhart Tolle twice in the last couple of weeks. Cool.
But like, is it a dangerous path? I guess is to. Of course, you can't help it if you're seeking the approval of others to feel like you're worthy yourself. Then that's most people can relate to that. But to me, I've just been sort of trying to reframe it in the sense of like, I don't. If I'm pitching a TV show, I don't need the people to like the show or like me in order to feel good about myself, because if I do, then I'm screwed.
Yeah.
I'll forever be screwed because you can't control what people will think about you. You just can't.
That's confidence though, right? I think it's like depending on you. And I think where you are at, like that is such an amazing headspace to be in. And I think I can sometimes get there and then I'll go back down. It's like ebbs and flows. But I think it is when you have spent a lot of your life with your confidence, and this is something that I've had to learn. If you put your confidence in the hands of others and you need them to validate you to feel like you're good enough. So it is completely out of our control and we'll never take control of it. But it is so hard not to do that.
I'm really interested in, so we first met, I think it was in 2020. I was on your podcast, or 2020 maybe? Because it was COVID, it was an online interview and I didn't know of you guys at the time. And as we were chatting, I was like, these girls are really lovely. I'd love to be able to support them if possible. And so at the end, I said, look, after the interview, I said, hey, if there's anyone I can help you guys, just please let me know. And then in my head, I'm thinking I could like post about them just to give them a bit of awareness. And then the interview finished and I went and looked you guys up because I wasn't aware of your incredible work then. And I remember I had a heart attack because you had 365,000 followers on Instagram. Steph has 1.4 million followers, whatever it is on Instagram. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm such an idiot. These guys are so big already. And then we went and asked Steph on the podcast. And to be really honest, it's because she had this like ridiculously big profile. Not that you didn't, you do. But then when you look at Steph's profile, it's just
bigger.
It's huge. Yeah. And so to be really honest, that's why we asked her on the podcast. But even thinking about it now, I just feel like that, I mean, you must have dealt with that a lot throughout your journey with Steph.
Well, I think that's interesting, and that must have been awful for you, Laura, because it, in one sort of fell swoop, reinforced awful things that you might think about yourself. And it also, and we inherently kind of reinforce the stereotype that followers and numbers are what count, and not the other, and not who you are.
Yeah. And I feel just awful about that. Back then, I remember, I think it was season 1 or season 2.
Yeah, 1, I think.
I remember in my mind, I was thinking, we didn't know what this podcast really was at that point.
Well, at that point, the podcast was purely, and it still is now to a certain degree, but it was purely, the concept was purely have people on whose life seems perfect, and then they talk about why it isn't necessarily perfect. And so we were, I guess, not to defend it in any way, but it was like trying to the biggest names we could get. It was about doing that, and I think that was probably why we chose the Steph.
Totally.
And
I just feel
like the bigger the number, the more that story makes sense.
Yeah,
and then but I feel even awful knowing for you to come back to the question. Has it been something you've had to deal with? What people say behind your back about you and Steph? Is that something you've had to deal with for a long time?
Yeah. I mean, I remember that because when we had you on the podcast, Steph was definitely a fan of your podcast. However, I don't think she listened to it very much.
Yeah, well, she's dead to me.
Yeah. And I loved it and listened to every episode. You were doing less episodes at that point.
We did 6 for the whole year.
It was like every now and then there'd be one. Oh, it's a surprise.
Yeah.
Whatever's
surprise
one,
to us too.
Whatever's one down from phoning it in, that's what we were doing.
And I remember your work is so fantastic. And I remember after the podcast, after we had you and Hugh, you sent Steph and I both a message, and Steph, you asked to come on the podcast, and you sent me a message, which was so lovely. And it said something like, hello, we're going to have Steph on the podcast because of X, Y, and Z, but we want to have you on someday or something like that. I remember reading it, and it's a message that I get a lot. And it's I have to say now, Steph and I have really owned who we are. We're so different. We've been able to really lean into that. So I think now it's something that we have absolutely I've worked through 100%, and I don't feel this way at all anymore because we really own who we are, and that's amazing. And I'm so lucky to have Steph. But for a long time, I was always number 2, which is and it was interesting. My coping mechanism for that was just accepting that that's just what I was. So then I would never be let down when it happened. But I remember that because I remember getting that message, and it was so nice. But I remember when I read it, I just said, oh, poor Hugh, he's had to send me this pity message that he feels like that he knew that it wouldn't, maybe you did or you didn't know, like make up a reason why you're having Steph on and not me when I know why the reason is and you don't even need to tell me. And I remember thinking that. And then because when Steph was like, oh, I'm coming on the Imperfects, and she was like, yeah, it's because she didn't really know it. And for me, it was a podcast that meant it was really exciting. And so then when you asked me to come on, well, Bridget actually emailed me to come on. I was so embarrassed because the first thing that came to my mind, which I suppose is coming back to what people would say behind your back, is that Hugh had come to both of you and said, oh, I feel really bad for Laura. It's getting awkward. We have to have her on the podcast. And then both of you were like, oh, it's not going to be good. And I'm laughing, but seriously, this is my mind.
Mm-hmm.
My coping mechanism was just accepting that I'm number two. Or if I did get invited to something, it was because I was friends with Steph, not because of me, if that makes sense.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. Yeah, it's I relate to it in a lot of different ways. Like, I spent a lot of my life working with, Hames and Andy, and similar thing, I think. And I hadn't really thought about it in terms like that, where it's just you accept you're a backup, and I would the voice in my head for a long time was like, I'm definitely getting this call because Hames and Andy said no. Like
Yeah.
that was definitely, and sometimes it would have been true, sometimes it definitely wouldn't have been true, but that was probably my coping mechanism to kind of protect myself from the feeling that it's like, well, I'm not good enough to be invited to the Emirates marquee at Spring Carnival, so that's why I'm in the Jaguar tent. But it's like, but I used to think that shit all the time. Now a lot's changed since then, but I completely relate to that, and it's a very real thing, because most people, I would say, would look at you, and I could talk about myself as well, would look at me and go like, oh, well, life must be great. Look at all the stuff you've done and blah, blah, blah. But we create the bullshit ourselves. And because whether or not that's even true, that you were number two, it doesn't actually matter. It's that we create the thoughts ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I don't see myself. Well, maybe I do a little bit more than I admitted to. But when you offered before that I should come on your show, the first thing I thought was, oh, that's just because, like, I shouldn't go on the show. I don't deserve to be on the show.
Is that what you thought?
Yeah. The first thing was like, well, that was just awkward for her because the other two
really
people at this
sad.
table have been on the show, and I was just trying to analyze what's going on in my head then, because in our relationship, I don't see myself as like less than you guys. I very much, to use a Ben Crow thing, see a sort of horizontal thing, but I'm sure there are people out there that listen to the show and think, well, I'm sure it's you get good and bad stuff, but but the immediate thought was it was a bit of a pity invite.
I'm so sorry that I made you feel that way.
No, that's not on you. That's
No,
as
but
we've
it's-
discussed. Like that's my. I just thought that was probably worth mentioning, considering it's exactly.
Well, it's absolutely not true, and I think you're wonderful, and I think you asked the best. You guys asked really good questions.
But if you were to rank,
I would put Josh first. Sorry.
MySpace
to get,
top
to
questions.
get the horizontal relationships bit. Yeah, I just think it's. I don't know if it occurs for everyone in all aspects of life. It doesn't matter if there's a public profile attached to the relationship or not. Whether people somewhat rank themselves in friendship groups, I'm sure it happens a lot. But yeah, and it's a strange one because I really do, in our relationship, don't feel like that. But I think when other people from a public persona thing, I would definitely put myself as like the B team, to use your phrase before. So yeah, anyway, that's just an interesting tidbit.
Great tidbit. He does good tidbits.
Very good tidbits.
I was just wondering, like, whether, like, on a good day, like for you, what do you think people, like, when you're feeling good about yourself and your confidence is high and you've just done something great and you feel really good about it and you feel really good about yourself, what do you think people are saying about you? Like, I guess to simplify it, like, what do you hope people are saying about you behind your
And
back?
after you've answered that, I've got an add-on to that question.
Yeah, and then I've got something after that as well.
Oh.
So,
And then I've got a tidbit.
yeah, oh, great. Well, it wouldn't be an episode without a tidbit.
I think on a good day, I wouldn't give a fuck, to be honest, what anyone's thinking about me or saying about me, which is obviously not today, but usually it's more days than non-days. But I wanted to be open about it today because I think it's really important. I think in what I would hope people would say, I think it comes back to why I feel like I'm on this planet, and it is to help people. And right now my mission and, you know, what we're doing at Kick is helping people feel good about themselves. For me, it's knowing, or I hope what people would say is that I have helped them to believe in themselves, that they can. And it seems a bit silly sometimes when I talk about this because, except I feel like you understand in that sometimes when we prove ourselves things in terms of like exercise, it might just be running 100 meters or 200 meters. We can actually take that confidence and use it in so many other elements of our life because it's a safe place to push yourself out of your comfort zone. Or safe for, not for everyone, but for me, that's what it feels like. And so for us to be able to help people, you know, I hope someone would say, and I'm so lucky I get to have these conversations with people that, you know, I'd never run before in my life and now I can run 10 kilometers, and I had believed for my entire life this kind of idea that I'm just not a runner. But because of your work, I now do believe that I am. And I'm now wearing shorts when I run, not because my body's changed, but because I can do whatever I want and I don't need to worry about what other people think of me anymore. And so I think that's what I hope people would say.
Yeah.
So you've answered my add-on question already. I was going to say, I think you have. When do you feel like, are there times, the things that you do where when you're doing it or you finish doing it, you go, I don't give a fuck what people think?
Do you know what it is now I think about it? It's when I have showed up authentically as me.
Right.
And in that moment after it.
Okay.
That's when I feel like today I feel like I have been myself, and so I won't leave this room thinking, oh no, what are the trolls going to say about me? I'll leave it saying I was myself, and I can't ask myself to be anything else other than, I can't expect anything more of myself, right, than what I have to offer on this day. And it comes back to, Josh, what we started with around, even at my worst, I'm good enough.
Yeah.
And I think when you show up, when I know that when I show up as myself, I can't expect more of myself than that. And so it's in those moments.
I mean, so many people, you have so many people following you through Kick, whether it's a podcast, whether you're traveling around the country running the exercise classes that you do. I think in owning all your insecurities like you have today, I think that's what, and the irony of it, like you're talking about the fact you know, like all the worries that you have, that's what makes you so accessible to the people that follow you. And that's why you're able to affect so many people's lives in such a positive way. So I think it's a lovely gift that you have that you're sharing with so many people. I think it's really important. So thanks for answering what is, I think, the scariest question in the deck. I really do.
Yeah.
I didn't think anyone would ever do it. And here you go.
Thanks, Laura.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It means a lot to me.
Thanks.
Thank you.